Have you ever wondered what people will look like in the future? These stunning pictures and fascinating theories about the year 2050 and beyond will blow your mind. Just wait till you see the predictions for 100,000 years from now. They look like they're straight out of a sci-fi movie. If this is your first time visiting our channel, don't forget to subscribe and please give this video a big thumbs up. Today we're sharing what humans will look like by 2050 and beyond. Multiracial diversity. In 2013, National Geographic celebrated its 125th anniversary with an issue about the changing face of America. Lise Funderburg wrote the article in the October magazine, and photographer Martin Scholler took portraits of multiracial families. The feature celebrated the beauty of multiracial diversity, and the images challenged traditional notions of identity. The pictures were deemed to be intriguing because they disrupted our expectations of what kinds of features typically go together. We don't normally see that skin tone with that eye color or that hairstyle with those kinds of lips. And it got the nation talking about identity, expectation, and race. The article also discussed the limitations of historic categories relating to race. With such a change in the US population, predictions were made about how Americans will look in the year 2050. Fast forward a few decades to that moment in time, and humankind in the States will show even greater racial diversity. The average American will be mixed race. This is due to the rise in interracial marriages and the rise in biracial birth. And it was the change to the census form that made all the difference to the way people defined race in an official format. The change in census forms. For the first time in the year 2000, the U.S. Census Bureau released a census form that allowed people to choose more than one category in the race section. At that time, 6.8 million people did so. Move forward to 2010, and that number increased by 32% to 9 million. This made it one of the fastest growing categories and enabled the U.S. Census Bureau to start collecting detailed data on multiracial people. Compare that to the 1960s census, which showed that the U.S. was 99% black or white. The increase suggests that by the time we reach 2050, the beautiful diversity of multiracial people will be the norm. This change in the census form was a welcome step in the right direction for many who had felt limited by the previous racial categories that dated all the way back to the late 18th century. German scientist Johann Friedrich Blumenbach established 5 natural varieties, which were black, brown, red, white, and yellow. Of course, any categorization is still problematic, but the modern multiple race options allows individuals more choice in describing their racial identity. All kinds of influences are at play when we decide which boxes to check out on such a form, including loyalty to heritage and situational advantages. Interracial marriages. Incredibly, as recently as 1966, 17 states still had laws against interracial marriages. But that kind of position has long been abolished, and interracial marriages have been increasing over the last few decades. A report released by the Pew Research Center showed that 15% of new marriages were between people of different races or ethnicities in 2010. That figure is more than twice the share in 1980. It's interesting to compare the percentage of mixed-race marriages between the states. For example, the highest rate of interracial marriage is in Hawaii and stands at just over 42%. Regarding the whole nation, mixed-race couples account for 8.4% of total marriages. This can further be broken down into the percentage of intermarriages by race. The largest proportion of people marrying outside their ethnic or racial group were Asians at 28%, then Hispanics at 26%, blacks at 17%, and whites at 9%. Studies show that young people under 30 are more amenable to interracial relationships than the older generations. This suggests that the millennial generation will play a significant part in the predicted mixed-race future of the U.S. Biracial babies. A natural result of the increase in interracial marriages is, of course, an increase in the birth of biracial or multiracial babies. Figures are now recorded on the census and are also becoming much greater because of the way parents choose to identify their children. In the 2000 census, barely 5% of children born were listed on the form as being 2 or more races. By the 2010 census, more than 7% of the 3.5 million children born in 2009 were of 2 or more races. The number of children born to Asian and white couples and to black and white couples nearly doubled. This increase was also due to the cultural shift that had taken place. A Brookings Institution demographer, William H. Frey, believes that people are more comfortable in identifying themselves and their children as mixed race because it's more socially acceptable, more mainstream. For example, in the National Geographic feature, 5-year-old Tayden Burrell from Florida considers himself black and white biracial and checked the census box white-black. 7-year-old Yoel Chuck Bautista from California has the self self-identity of Black Mexican and check the census box Black. His mother, Tracy Williams Bautista, says her son identifies as Black when he's with her and Mexican when he's with his father. She added jokingly, "We call him a Blaxican." Complex heritage. The changing face of America depicted in the National Geographic provides evidence of the fluidity of ethnic and racial identity and the difficulty in categorizing this on a form. We have seen with Yolchak Bautista how individuals might identify as a mix of races, but chose to check only one race box on the census form. This could be because the census form simply does not have the capability to represent all of the many varied mixes of race that are possible. This is also the case for women like 18-year-old Jordan Spencer from Texas, who self-identifies as Black biracial, but check the black box on the census form. 26-year-old Celeste Sita from Brooklyn, New York identifies herself as Dominican and Korean, and checked the Asian/some other race boxes on the census form. She revealed to the National Geographic that when people ask her what she is, she gets them to guess first, but simply mentioning her Korean and Dominican heritage is only part of her story, as she also has Puerto Rican adoptive family, a Long Island childhood, and an African-American sister. Celeste views the attention she gets for her unusual looks as a gift and a curse. The change in majority. With such increases in America's multiracial population, it is predicted that the U.S. will soon be a pluralist nation. In 2012, the Census Bureau projected that by 2043, non-Hispanic whites would no longer be the majority. Get ready for a whole load of fascinating states. In 1960, whites accounted for 85% of the American population. But from 1965 onwards, that share decreased following changes to the U.S. immigration laws. By 2000, that percentage had dropped to 69%. By 2060, the number of multiracial people is projected to be more than triple, from 7.5 million to 26.7 million. Let's see how that breaks down into percentages. In 2060, the percentage of whites is predicted to stand at 43%, with blacks slightly up from now at 14.7% and Asians increasing from 5 to 8%. It is the Hispanic population that is predicted to grow the most, with its current share of 17% going up to 31%. Acting Census Bureau Director Thomas Messenberg explained that although Hispanics will be the largest single group, no group would be in the majority. This change happens faster in the younger generations. In 2011, racial and ethnic minorities became a majority among babies under 1 for the first time in the U.S. Minorities are predicted to become the majority among children in 2019. The Race Card Project. These fascinating insights into race in modern and future America are further explored by Michelle Norris, the curator of the Race Card Project. This project invited candid submissions from people who had been invited to think about the word race, and then distill their experiences, observations, or thoughts into a 6-word sentence. Michelle, who is a special correspondent for National Public Radio, invited everyone to share their 6 words along with a photo on Twitter or Instagram using the hashtag #NatGeoRaceCardProject. She wrote about the diversity of America and the increase in interracial marriages, with 4.8 million new marriages in 2010 being among people of different racial backgrounds. Her article for National Geographic also discussed the phenomenon of the edgewalker, which provides greater insight into the changing face of America. The moniker comes from Dr. Nina Boyd Krebs' book, which describes edgewalkers as ambassadors who move between cultural traditions and cultural communities with some level of ease, comfort, and enjoyment. Since identity is not necessarily a concrete concept, but rather situational, some people proudly code switch between cultures and perceived boundaries. They respond to questions about their heritage with calmness and patience. In 20,000 years. We've explored projections for what Americans will look like by 2050, so now let's look much further into the future. Artist and researcher Nicolay Lamb wanted to imagine what humankind would look like thousands of years from now. He had conversations with computational geneticist Dr. Alan Kwan to speculate about the possible impact of genetic engineering and technological advances. And then Lamb created illustrations of the changing human face on this one possible timeline. It's worth bearing in mind that these ideas are described as thought experiments, not scientific predictions, but they're really fun to consider. Think of it as speculation about how the climate will change, how wearable tech will progress, and how all of that could change the way we use our bodies. In Lamb's illustration of humans 20,000 years from now, they have a yellow ring around their eyes called a communications lens, which is the Google Glass of the future. They also have a larger head with a forehead that is a bit too large. Why so? Our foreheads have been expanding since the 14th century, according to scientists who presented their research into the evolution of higher foreheads in the British Dental Journal. Dr. Kwan expects our heads will grow in size to accommodate a larger brain. In 60,000 years. Let's fast forward to 60,000 years from now and take a look at what Quan and Lam have presented. The humans in these illustrations have even larger foreheads. They have noticeably larger eyes too. This is because people will no longer only be living on Earth thanks to humankind's colonization of the solar system and beyond. People will be living in dimmer environments in colonies further away from the sun. They need to have bigger eyes as there isn't as much light. Their skin is also more pigmented, and this is to reduce damage from UV radiation outside of the Earth's protective ozone. Lam and Quan aren't saying these changes have come about because of a natural evolutionary alteration over time, but rather because of genetic engineering. Humankind will be able to control the human genome to suit taste and necessity. As for the thicker eyelids and pronounced skull bone under the brow, they've come about to help protect against the disruption of cosmic rays outside the Earth's atmosphere. This is something that astronauts in our present day already experience, apparently. As for those communication lenses in the eyes, they'll be augmented with mini bone conduction devices implanted above the ears for communication, so hearing and sight will both be supplemented. In 100,000 years. Take a look at the human face in 100,000 years and you can't help but be shocked. Those huge eyes. The people who dream them up describe them as unnervingly large. The eyes also have strange-looking features which are there to enhance low-light vision. There's even a sideways blink to help further protect the eyes from the disruptive effect of the cosmic rays. There are subtle differences too, like larger nostrils. These help humans to breathe in environments that are off-planet. Because of the larger head, people will have denser hair to help restrict heat loss. Dr. Quan explains that by this point in the future, the human face will have been totally mastered and will be biased towards appealing features like symmetry, straight noses, and intense eyes. Parents will be able to choose which features their children inherit from them, like teeth and eye color. Wearable tech will be implanted and even more sophisticated. It's not surprising that certain journalists reacted strongly against their presentation of the human face in the future, but Dr. Quan responded by explaining that it was all just a simple speculation for a harmless thought experiment. In being passed around the internet, it got reinterpreted as scientific prediction, which it never purported to be. What do you make of all of this? How would you like to see humans change in the future, and what are your experiences of race and identity? Let us know in the comments and give our video a big thumbs up.